Welcome to the Big Success Show. Today, learn how to achieve effortless wealth. Brought to you by FinancialFreedomTool.com. Plenty of money for life.
Big Success with the Professor and Mary-Lynn.
You may have seen him on the CBS Evening News, CNN, CNBC, The Dave Ramsey Show, USA Today, Kiplinger's Personal Finance, Success Magazine, Inc. Magazine, Reader's Digest, Business Insider. Should I keep going, Mary-Lynn?
Oh, of course.
There's still a whole bunch more.
I know. It's hard to know where Tom's been. Tom Corley. He's a certified public accountant and a certified financial planner. He's also a best-selling author of 5 books. He's here today to talk about his latest book, Effortless Wealth. Welcome to the Big Success Show, Tom.
Oh, well, thank you guys for having me on. I really appreciate it. And you know, I love to share my research and some of the guidance that I've gotten from other self-made millionaires that, started out with nothing. So I'm just happy to share whatever information I can to help people out there.
Well, fantastic. Let's get her started with actually the full title of your book, Tom. It's Effortless Wealth, Smart Money Habits at every stage of your life. Getting rich does not have to be hard. So my question to you, Tom, is how easy is it to get rich?
Oh, it is not easy to get rich. Actually, I try and cover this. So the Effortless Wealth is really written for the saver investors out there. You see, there's 4 paths to wealth. There's the saver investor path, which takes about 32 years for you to accumulate an average of $3.3 million. Then there's the big company climber path. That takes about 21 years to accumulate close to 3.4 million. And then there's the virtuoso path, and that takes about 20 years to accumulate approximately 3.9 million. And then there's the dreamer entrepreneur path, which takes, it's the shortest path. It takes 12 years, but it accumulates the most money, an average of 7.4 million. So there's 4, that's one of the things that came out of my research, which aside from habits, how important habits are to your success, the idea that there's no one way to become wealthy, there's multiple ways.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And actually, just so our audience knows, Tom, so you actually spent 5 years studying the daily activities of 233 rich people and 128 people living in poverty. So you've got a lot of experience looking at both sides of this equation.
Yeah, and you bring up a really great point. Thanks for bringing it up because, knowing what to do gets you halfway down the field. Mm-hmm. But knowing what not to do, that gets you in the end zone. You see, people who are successful, they figure out what to do and they figure out what not to do. So what sets my research apart, literally from everyone, I have no competition here. And that is the fact that I spent 5 years studying what to do, what the self-made millionaires did to become wealthy, and also what some of the things that they discovered along their journey that held them back and dragged them down and created obstacles and problems and adversity. And I also studied 128 poor people who, were never really taught what to do and were trying to figure it out on their own, but they just have all of these bad habits. So I try and that's why I call them rich habits, poor habits. I try and share both of those groups of habits so that you know what to do and what not to do. And this way you can succeed. You can get all the way down the field and score.
You actually had a little firsthand experience of what to do and what not to do because when you were 9 years old, your family went from multimillionaire status to broke in one day. So how did that happen?
Oh my God, what a story. So, when you're 9 years old, your memory isn't as great as, when you fast forward to, I'm 58 now. But I have to tell you, emotional events like that we went through, that memory sticks forever. And I remember the night that my father's warehouse had burned to the ground. And there's much more to the story. and it will take a whole segment to get through this. But I'm going to try and shortcut it. So my father took back his business after 18 months. He had sold it, and he took it back because the people he had sold it to didn't. They were supposed to make 3 payments of I think it was $1.6 million each in $1972. So
we're talking serious money.
A lot of money today.
Yeah.
Like in total, he sold the business for about $4.5 million, and he only got $1.67 million or something like that, which is probably the equivalent of about $6 or so million today. Anyway, he took the terms of the agreement, forced him to take the company back, and he did, and it was a completely different company than when he took it over.
Yep.
The people that bought the company had run it into the ground. They were doing none of the things that my father taught them to do, they weren't doing. And so he got a different company, and they were pissed off. And 30 days after my dad took back the business, the warehouse was the victim of arson. Just his warehouse. Of all the warehouses in the industrial development, his was the only one to burn down.
Wow.
And he lost about $3 million worth of inventory. So, my dad had called up the vendors and said, look, I need tools. That was his business, tool distributorship. He was the number 1 in the Northeast. And they said, Bill, we can't send you tools. You still owe us $3 million. He said, what are you talking about? Well, the new owners had gone on credit. My dad never paid for his stuff on credit. It was cash on delivery for him all the time. So he ended up, he had a choice. He could file for bankruptcy, the company, and keep his, he had about $3.5–4 million at the time. Or, as my dad said later in life, I could pay back all these vendors and manufacturers. And I said, Dad, why did you do that? Why didn't you just have the company file for bankruptcy, keep the $4 million that you had, and be on your merry way? And he said, if I filed for bankruptcy, those small manufacturers, there was about 15 of them, they would have all had to file for bankruptcy because he was that big. And, $500,000 meant a lot to some of them. So he said I couldn't put them into bankruptcy. So my father cut checks for about $3.2 million to all of those vendors and manufacturers. And so they were whole. And anyway, it took about 18 months of pursuing the insurance. He ran out of money. The insurance company, who wasn't his insurance company that he had for years and years and years, they fought him tooth and nail, and he ended up, after about 16 months, I think he said, it was 16 to 18 months, he finally surrendered. He ran out of money, had no more money to fight them. And he was walking over the Brooklyn Bridge from the courthouse because he didn't have any money to get home. He was going to walk to the Manhattan Ferry and take the ferry over because it was free to the Staten Island side, and get a ride home.
Wow.
And halfway through his walking over the Brooklyn Bridge, he had a George Bailey moment. He thought, why don't I just jump off this bridge? My life is over with. I failed my family. I failed my kids. And he really was thinking about committing suicide. But he didn't. He said, every time I looked over the edge, he crawled. You can climb over certain parts of the bridge. You can't get too close to the edge. But he said, I looked over parts of the bridge and I saw the whitecaps in the water in the Hudson Bay. And he said, and every one of those whitecaps was, a picture of one of my kids. So he turned around and he walked back over the bridge, got on the Staten Island ferry, and he just kept going.
That's an amazing story.
And what a great story of business, and a great story of how to just what you have to deal with when there's a crisis. Adversity
it visits everybody. But when you're an entrepreneur or you're, a big company climber, if you can't shoulder and get through the adversity, you're not going to succeed in life. So self-made millionaires in my study were special people because they faced adversity and they overcame it. Most people pack up their tents, they file for bankruptcy, and they get a job working for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
But self-made millionaires, they don't surrender. They never quit. They have a big capital G in the word grit.
Well, and there's two G's in big, and actually that's one of the reasons is because it does take grit, right? But you may have just answered this question, but I just want to make sure, Tom. So when we think of the big picture, and that's big with two G's, what's the fundamental difference between, in your studies, what's the fundamental difference between people who get rich and those who stay poor?
Well, my research, when I started doing this research on the millionaires and the poor people, I had no idea that the conclusion to my study was going to be that habits are the main number one reason why you're rich or you're poor. I didn't even know what habits were, to be honest with you. I'd never even thought about habits. But when I was looking at my Rich Habits research summary, which tracks about 340 data points that separate the rich from the poor,
Mm-hmm.
I realized, my gosh, most of these things are habits. They're daily habits. So I think habits are fundamentally the most important cause of wealth and poverty. One of the groups of habits that the self-made millionaires have that poor people don't have is something I like to call growth habits. Now, self-made millionaires engage in daily self-improvement. They read to learn. They study everything there is to know about their career or their industry. They become almost virtuosos or experts in what it is that they do. They're so knowledgeable, or they develop unique skill sets through a deliberate practice and analytical practice to become virtuosos in a skill set. And they do these things on a daily basis. They grow on a daily basis. So they're constantly evolving and improving and getting better. And by the time success visits them, they are completely different people in the sense that their knowledge base or their skill base renders them to be just superior to most everybody else. So these growth habits are probably the most important types of habits that you can engage in that separate the rich from the poor.
So you have to grow personally before you can grow your portfolio.
That's exactly right. And money is a byproduct of success, and success is a byproduct of growth.
Mm.
So it's like a domino, a domino effect. You have to grow, that leads to success, and then that leads to money. And everybody looks at these millionaires and say, boy, I'd love to be as wealthy as they are. But how many of them would spend 12 years, like the dreamer entrepreneurs in my study, learning and growing and facing adversity and overcoming obstacles and pitfalls and making mistakes that cost them an enormous amount of money, and have to worry, every month on whether or not they're going to make payroll? How many people have the broad shoulders, to survive that adversity? Not many, in my opinion.
And just to stray for a second, I want to ask a question about coronavirus because it just fits. Tom, you're talking about adversity. What advice would you have for someone who's just lost, 20, 30, 40, 50% of their portfolio? They're in the doldrums. Maybe they're a business owner and they're struggling to figure out how am I going to keep my, food on my table, but also my people's tables. What advice would you have for them going through this crisis?
Well, so when it comes to, stock valuations and all that stuff, these black swan events, they happen. And the people like successful people like, I don't know if you remember the 2008, 2009.
All too well.
Right. That was just terrible. But
yeah.
Guess what Warren Buffett was doing during 2008, 2009? He was buying.
Yeah.
He went crazy. and a lot of the self-made millionaires in my study did the same thing. They were actually, some of them, very motivated by the recession, and they said, "I'm going to go all in because I've been down this path before. I've seen the stock market go up and down, and guess what? It always ends up." So they bought. Now, for the individuals who are sitting on portfolios that have dropped, 30, 40%, just like in 2008, 2009, it's the same advice. Do nothing. The only time you have to do anything is if the money that you have invested, you need to survive. You need that money. You have to withdraw that money in order to feed your family. Then you have no choice. I can't tell you to sit and be patient and wait for the recovery in the stock market. That's unrealistic, isn't it? Right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got to do, and you've got to do whatever you have to do. And we've had 2008 and 2009, in my opinion, was a very near economic collapse. Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen here. This thing is going to be over in a few weeks, and it's going to be business as usual in a few months. So in my opinion, this is a little bit different. This is a cliff that we've fallen off of, and it's going to be a rocket ship that takes off once this is all over. So the question really is, how do you survive the next 2 months? And my response to that is, we're all in this together. You have family, you have friends. Some of them have money, and they can help you survive, and they have to help you survive. It's their responsibility to help family and friends during the, crises like this. That's what human beings do. We step up to the plate, and we help. And that's my advice: is to get on touch. If you're in desperate need of money, you're gonna have to reach out to family and friends until the stimulus package, the CARE Act, kicks in.
Fantastic. So now I want to kind of return back to our regular interview. So I understand, Tom, that it's all about habits. So my next question is, where and when do I start? Like for example, is the best time to start this when I'm I'm graduating, I'm getting my first job, or is there some other time? And what do I do?
Well, the one thing I always recommend is first identify your habits. Before you even start, you can't change habits you're completely oblivious to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So get a grip on the habits that you have right now. In my book, Rich Habits, it was my first book that I had written. I actually have a template in the book that you can use to identify good habits from bad habits, and then you make a list. How do you know? The process is this really. You spend 2 or 3 days, and you write down for 2 or 3 days on a notepad or a piece of paper that you keep in your pocket, things that you do during the day. And you write them down for 3 days in a row. Why? Because if on that piece of paper, you notice things that you're doing on day 2 and day 3 that you did on day 1 and day 2, they are probably habits.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the second part, is after writing down your activities during the day, the 3 days, then you identify each one as a habit. Then the phase 3 of this is then you identify each one of the habits as a good or a bad habit, just a plus or a minus. And once you've identified some of your negative or bad habits, your poor habits, that to me is the starting point. You have now created awareness
mm-hmm.
of the good habits that you have and the bad habits that you have. And then you start tackling the bad habits. And the way to do that, interestingly, according to my research and all the habit research that's out there, if you want to change a bad habit, the best way to do that is to introduce a good habit that is in conflict with that bad habit. For example, if you sit on the couch every day and watch TV and eat potato chips and drink beer, that's a bad habit.
Oh, darn it.
Right? So if you introduce a new habit, say aerobic exercise, and you baby step new habits. You want to create the neural infrastructure first, like like a building has a frame. Well, whenever you're starting a new habit, what takes place inside the brain is the creation of synapses. This is when 2 or more neurons, brain cells, are talking to one another. Well, what makes a habit is when the synapse is very strong and there's hundreds of thousands of brain cells communicating with each other. So what you want to do is you want to basically pave a highway in your brain and start that synapse, to form. And you do that through baby steps. So let's say you do want to do aerobic exercise because you don't want to be sitting on the couch eating and getting heavier and unhealthy. So you do maybe 5 or 10 minutes of aerobic exercise every day. That's it. No more than that. Keep it simple. After a month, the synapses, the brain cells, will have formed. And then you can amp it up. You can go to 15 minutes. And then you can go to 20 minutes and the next month, and 30 minutes and the next month. By the time you're up to, say, 40 minutes a day of jogging or doing some aerobic exercise, the habit synapse will be much stronger. And what's interesting about exercise as a rich habit is it's a keystone habit, meaning it has a domino effect on other habits. It will eliminate automatically other contradictory habits that get in its way, like sitting on a couch, eating potato chips, and drinking beer. You will stop doing that over time because it conflicts with the keystone habit of aerobic exercise. And the great thing about keystone habits like aerobic exercise is they create complementary habits. These are habits that are that complement, let's say, the keystone habit of aerobic exercise. Things like eating healthy. Mm-hmm. When you start exercising aerobically to lose weight, and you start losing weight, you say, "Hey, I like this. I want to lose more weight." So then you start eating healthier. Maybe you'll stop smoking cigarettes. Maybe you'll stop drinking as much beer, and you'll throw the potato chips out. So you create these complementary habits like healthy eating or intermittent fasting, things like that are complements to the new rich habit, the keystone habit that you've created.
Okay, so let's talk about money habits then. Your book is about money habits at every stage of your life. So what are some money habits that we should be following at various stages?
Yeah, so Effortless Wealth is really written for the saver investors in the world, the individuals who have a job, don't make a lot of money, and they're not virtuosos and not big company climbers. They're not entrepreneurs. So they're just they're happy with being an employee. They don't want to have the responsibility of owning a business or becoming a senior executive, or they don't want to develop these mad skills that often require a lot of time and money. So they just want to work, do what they do, and become millionaires by saving and investing. And so the only way that that's possible is to create a standard of living that allows you, that only costs 80% of the income that you earn. So if you earn $50,000 a year and you want to save 20%. You're going to put away, you're going to just live off of that 80%. And then what are you going to do with the 20% savings? You're going to prudently and consistently invest that money. Over time, that money will compound, your investments will grow. And as you keep saving the 20% or more of your income, maintaining your standard of living, eventually over time, and according to my research, it takes about 32 years, you will accumulate enough wealth that you'll be financially independent, maybe even wealthy. So that's saving would be one of the rich habits. Living below your means would be another one of the rich habits. Being frugal would be another one of the rich habits. Associating with other like-minded, frugal savers would be another rich habit. The association, rich associations, rich relationships. Those are you want to forge relationships of people that have the same or similar habits as you. And in this case, it would be saving money, investing their savings, and being frugal.
That sounds sensible. Why?
Yes.
Why is that so difficult for so many?
Well, because we live in a consumer-based society, uh, everybody is trying to keep up with everybody else, especially now in light of social media. So you see pictures of the Kardashians going on vacation somewhere on a yacht, and you think, I want to have that. So you book a vacation with your friends on a cruise ship that you can't afford, and you spend a year paying it off. So it's really the influence of the people around you that takes you off track, and that's why it's so important to really be aware of these things that are going on around you that are influencing your decision making. Peer pressure can have a real strong influence on your how you spend your money. So it's really that simple. You just have to, I guess, consciously decide I'm not going to be a part of the herd, the consumerist herd.
And Tom, I guess this may relate to that. So let's just say I'm 50 years old. I haven't done a thing towards my retirement. I don't have 32 years. What would you suggest for that person?
Well, there's two things really. So no matter what, you have to start doing something, right? So
Yes.
you have to start. You have to start cutting back in your life. It's very difficult, to be honest with you, when you're 45 years old. You have two kids in college, and you're just stuck you're between a rock and a hard place. There's almost nothing you can do about that. You want to try and get your kids through college. We all have that. As parents, we have that goal. But if you're not at that stage, or you're out of that stage, and maybe you're in your early 50s, and you don't have enough saved up because you were spending $280,000 a kid over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now those kids are out of the house, and you don't need that big house. So now it's time to downsize, and the housing is the number one cost of living, right? So you want to reduce the number one cost of living. So if you can reduce your housing costs from, say, 35% down to 25%, now you have 10% that you can start using to invest. And the interesting thing is there's like a momentum that gets built up when you start forging the saving habit. Even in your early 50s, it grows and it grows, and you may not have quite enough to retire on when you're, say, 70, because when you start saving and investing late, it means you have to continue to work into your late 60s and early 70s. There's no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
Social Security is not going to be enough. So the other thing you could do in conjunction with this is you could pursue something on the side that could eventually create a revenue stream. You could build a separate stream of income. That takes an investment. It usually takes about 5 years for one individual stream of income to start to bear fruit. So you could do that on the side while you're cutting back on your cost of living. So you have these two things going at the same time. And maybe when you're in your 60s, this side business, this side gig that you're doing, maybe it will grow and bear even more fruit and provide you with even more money that you can then either use as cash flow to get you through your retirement years,
Mm-hmm.
or you could sell the business, or you can just invest that money. So there's a number of things you can do with that side business.
And I love this because I think sometimes people get to the point where it's like, okay, I haven't done anything, and it almost becomes like, we want to just slap ourselves in the face over and over again and just think that we can't do anything. But what I love about what you're saying, Tom, is there's still hope, there's still time, but you do need to be more urgent.
Yeah, look, the only time to raise a white flag and surrender to life is when you're dead.
Yes. That's a good one.
That's a very good line. I love it.
As far as I know, I'm not there yet. The evidence is still compiling.
I love the story. I love the story about Elon Musk. You know, he had back in 2008, he was on his, I think it was his fourth experimental flight of the Falcon rocket.
Mm-hmm.
And the first three had failed. And it was to take place in August of 2008. And if it failed, Elon Musk was out of money.
Hmm.
And what was interesting is people asked him years later, you know, when you had, you know, 170 million at one point, and you went through almost all of that, a big chunk of it because of SpaceX.
Mm-hmm.
And you're literally at this point in time where failure means you're basically out of money. Why didn't you just at any point when the rockets were failing say, you know what, I'm gonna fold up my tent. I've got, you know, $50 million left, and I'm gonna live off of that. I tried. I gave my best effort. Why didn't you just quit at that point? And he said to the interviewer, I'll never forget it. He said, that never crossed my mind. And he said, in fact, I will tell you this. I would never quit. The only time that I would quit on anything is either when I am physically disabled or when I'm dead.
Yep. That is the entrepreneurial spirit, isn't it?
That is.
We like to say either die another day or live to fight another day, right?
Right.
That's what it's all about.
Well, this has been a very motivational and inspirational discussion about your book. I mean, that's just, and we've just barely touched the surface of what is in Effortless Wealth. Smart money habits at every stage of your life. Getting rich does not have to be hard. The book is written by Tom Corley. We can get the book all places where good books are sold, right?
That's right. And the cool thing is that Success Magazine is going to do a profile on the book.
Oh, awesome.
So that's going to be fun. And I think, you know, it's going to be a pretty successful book. I've already got it in the pipeline in other countries. They've already reached out to me, and they wanted a copy of the book. So it's going to be, you know, all over the world, I hope. But it's a powerful book, and it's a narrative. So it's an interesting story. And I like telling narratives to teach lessons, important lessons. So I think everybody's going to enjoy it.
Well, we'll hope it spreads like a virus.
Good, all good. And Tom, where do you want people to go? Is there a website that you want to send people to? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, so my website, richhabits.net, is where I post all of my research articles. And it's also, I include on there a lot of my media interviews, my podcasts. So you can get, you know, that there's information in those that you can gather from there. And I also have some free resources that individuals can use to help them, you know, try and change their lives.
Fantastic. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tom. We really appreciate it, and we hope to have you on again.
Well, thanks, Mary-Lynn, and thanks, George. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
And we thank you so much for listening today.
Until next time,
Here's to your big success.
Find big success at biggsuccess.com.